And we're back. We're back with another episode of the Vet, the Bet, the Casual. Fresh off of UFC 256. What a card that was. Just a stacked lineup. And honestly, it lived up to all the hype. Well, great card right there. In terms of posted plays, we went 2-1. We did decide to go against the leader bias.
So funny. I do want to touch on that just because, I gotta say, I honestly watched Billy Quarantino's last fight, and I was like, I don't see what everybody's talking about. I don't know why we watched Gavin Tucker do so well against Justin James, and then not. It's just
go against him.
What did we do? But in any case, you live and learn. Pies, nobody can go perfect, even us. So keep going on. It is what it is.
The funny thing is, anybody who watched our video on Tucker last week is probably like, "Oh, these boys were definitely on Gavin Tucker." There's no doubt about it.
And that's all we need.
Hopefully, you didn't see our posted plays, but we did go 2-1 in those. Our lone loss was the Quarantillo man himself. Otherwise, it was a very great card. We actually went 7-3. The one thing I wanted to touch on is, you did kind of leave those main events up to me, and my leans were Ferguson and they were Figueiredo. I got to give you the hype, man. I got to give you the credit there. Both of them, you went against me. Oliveira one-handedly. That wasn't even close. I love Ferguson. You love Ferguson. I know this. And so kudos to you for kind of putting that bias aside, really breaking down that fight and exposing how good Oliveira was. And then on the flip side, Moreno, in my opinion, won the fight too. Watching that fight, if you're giving that extra point to him for what Figueiredo was doing, Moreno won that fight. So great call on that as well. That was not a minus 350 favorite. I got to give kudos to you for that main event.
So actually, you know what? Just because you brought it up, if there's one thing Paisan has taught me, it's to not do the I told you so's and not do the gloating. So what I actually want to talk about here is primarily the technical aspects of these fights, right? So what did we think Charles Oliveira would be good at? Fundamentally, he was able to have his way with Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson was not able to get off his back. Tony Ferguson was not able to pepper him with strikes. Tony Ferguson was not able to get in the clinch and land some damaging elbows to help him get it to the later rounds to maybe score himself a finish or at least a close decision. That's the part that kind of really took me away even because I didn't expect Charles Oliveira to look like that. But again, we talked about the come up. That's the thing about Charles Oliveira, right? I've watched him get punched in the face regularly as a 20-year-old to just lock in one final submission and get the win. Been through the pain with them. This is our time. October 17th birthday, here we come. 2021 is our year. And it's really just about that, right? His climb, we talked about it. There's certain guys that have beaten him in his career. Tony Ferguson lined up very well, might have even been the best version of those guys. We saw that Charles Oliveira at 30 plus now is very much ready for the top of the crop type fighters. And I'm very excited to watch him fight. Going back to what you said about the main event, I don't think you're actually that wrong. So I personally looked into the stats I looked into what some of the pundits and things of that sort were saying. And you know what? If you look at the way the judges had scored the round, funny enough, the last round was a round that is kind of unanimously said to go to Deiveson Figueiredo, which means that there's the one judge who did not give it to him, and had he given him the fifth round, you would have actually won that fight. Just so you know, there was actually one judge that did not give him that round, and that's the only reason it's a draw. So had that judge given Figueiredo the fifth round win, which he actually did earn fair and square, Figueiredo would have retained the championship on points.
Yeah, absolutely. But man, Moreno was impressive. And something else that you kind of just touched on is, the up and coming, the preparation. It holds so much value now with the amount of fights people are getting in. And I think that's case in point with that Jacare Souza and Kevin Holland fight. It's like, Souza comes in with that veteran, mojo that should be able to handle it. But some of these up and comers are not to be messed with, man. And Kevin Holland is just one of those guys. Same thing that we've kind of run into with Joaquin Buckley as well. They're learning fast and they are executing.
I think you hit it best with the hunger of a fighter that is getting this opportunity. I think we're seeing a clear-cut example of fighters who are under contract, who do it for a living, who are taking fights, and guys who are thriving under this circumstance. There is a huge difference right now in that regard, and Kevin Holland, you sniped that. I believe his improvement since some of the fights that we've seen, very surprising losses, but you know, to see what he did to Jacare, to knock him like that. You know, it's funny, the one punch very in the beginning, you see him wobbling, you're like, yo, this is hectic. Oh my God, wow. And I'm a little disappointed in us for even going against Kevin Holland because, you know, we did see size. We did see ground skills. But yo, Kevin Holland came to fight. Travis Lutter, right? Travis Lutter, old school grappler in the UFC. He came to play. Show off his coach really well. I think overall that was a great card for us, but you know, little lapses of judgment in the heat of the moment. If you remember, there was something really excited we were wanting to touch on. They released the rankings in the UFC today. And so if you think about it, I just want you to know, I'm going to kick this off right now. Khabib is still the champion and at the top. Wow. Justin Gaethje is
deservedly.
Yep, Justin Gaethje is number 1. Number 2 is Poirier. Can you guess who number 3 is now? Up 4 spots.
Mr. Holland himself, eh?
Oh, Charles Oliveira, lightweight, my man. We got Charles. Wow. Charles Oliveira's number 3 now. Pushed. We got Tony Ferguson dropping to number 4, and then everybody else just kind of dropped 1 spot because Oliveira just jumped them all. So Dos Anjos moves to 7th in the UFC. Dan Hooker moves to 6th. Conor McGregor moves to 5th, and Tony sits at 4th with Oliveira looking like he's gonna get, you know, that number 1 title shot whenever that comes around. That whole division in itself, you know, that top 3 is gonna.
I was gonna say, man, I was actually gonna touch on it later, but that division is so stacked. It's insane. Like it could be split into 2 and have championship quality caliber along the way.
And questions, right? So it's like, you know, Dana White is just so convinced that Khabib is gonna come back, and that here we go, right? No one's getting stripped. No one's fighting for this, you know, like at the end of the day, we're going to get to see the Conor Poirier matchup. But outside of that, like it's a pretty wide open division in that sense. And I think we're seeing Charles Oliveira kind of make his name.
And a very entertaining one at that as well.
That's what I'm saying.
Anything else you want to touch on UFC 256 before we move on to this exciting new card that we got coming up this weekend?
To be honest, in looking at the rankings quite quickly, I just want to see if anything jumped out at us. You know, since it is Tuesday, we get them live. Honestly, I think that's the biggest one. And you got Kevin Holland now, you know, top 10, if you want to kind of jump on that, up 5 spots. So, you know, Chris Weidman's out of the top 10, Edmund Shabazian out of the top 10, and there's Kevin Holland just sitting right there, you know. I think that's
good for him.
A beautiful one to touch on. But outside of that, you know, Kevin Holland, Charles Oliveira, big movements coming out of that weekend.
Yeah, for sure. Nice way to finish off the year for those guys. And we got some more exciting stuff coming up. So shall we dive right into this card?
Oh, baby, you know I'm ready.
All right. So kicking us off is Rick Glenn and Carlton Minus. So this is going to be a lightweight bout. I believe Glenn is a natural featherweight and Carlton is a natural welterweight. So it seems like they're meeting in the middle for this one. Am I correct in saying that?
That is 100% correct.
Yeah, so I guess that'll be a little interesting to see them kind of both out of their own comfort zone. Glenn sports a nice 21-6-1 record, but he is only 3-3 in the UFC, so that's a little bit troubling. He hasn't fought since 2018, where he lost in decision to Kevin Aguilar. So I'm really curious to see what he has left, you know, in the tank, as we haven't seen him for a while. You know, it's funny, kind of touching on that Beaver bias, but Gavin Tucker was, you know, his only loss is to Rick Glenn. So let's see what he brings into this one. Carlton Clutch Minus is a very interesting name there, but you know, he comes in with a 10-2 record, but he's only had 1 fight in the UFC. It was back in August. He lost his debut to Smellsburger. Is that his name, Smellsburger?
Yeah, bro. We actually bet on Simonsberger in that fight and lost, because that was actually a really, really close fight, but he ended up losing that decision there.
And so that's kind of his only loss in the UFC. So I'm curious to see if he can kind of make the proper adjustments in moving to this organization and seeing what he can do. What do you see on this one?
So funny enough, I really, we kind of called the last fight, right? So he lost to Smesberger via decision, kind of on strikes, right? So Rick Glenn has a lot of tape on him. We can see what he can do. So we kind of want to go at this, say fight by fight. Most recently, he did fight Aguilar and lost. Aguilar had him rocked quite a bit. He was able to get him up against the fence, was able to tire him out towards that, last round. It was actually a really good fight. And that was back in 2018. So my main issue right now with Glenn is I actually believe he has every opportunity to win this fight. You have, Minus on the other side who just doesn't have the same experience. He doesn't have that, you're not getting that type of exposure in Alaska. It's just that simple. And when I look at him fight, he's not the quickest striker, but he's technical. He's a technical striker. But, moving down in weight, you are going to be taking on a faster striker. The fact that, Glenn's even moving up tells you even more so. Without even giving out much in height, he's going to get a pretty good striker and grappler that's going to be able to push the pace in many different ways. So it's not that I see this as a toss-up fight for anyone, but I really do see Glenn being way more well-versed to be able to kind of dictate where this fight goes, how it goes. The striking of Carlton Minus doesn't look scary in terms of what he's faced. Like, Aguilar took it to him. He was a busted mess by the end of that fight. And so I just think there's just no question that from what he's seen, this fight should be a lot easier than it looks on paper.
Yeah, and so with that, let's kind of dive right into the odds here. Who do you see as the Vegas favorite and by how much?
Yeah, so even going quickly, based on some of the losses I've seen, the Miles Jury fight, right? He did spend a lot of time on the ground. It just so happens that some of the guys who are better all around are the guys that seem to have a way with him. I don't think this is the case. So based on what I've seen in losses and what I've seen in Carlton Minus's wins, this looks like a minus 200 favorite. So I have to go with Rick Glenn, minus 250 favorite. I actually believe Minus might be a favorite here, but this is actually where I think the line should be. This is one where I went with the veteran very much so.
Yeah, and your initial inclination is right.
Okay.
Glenn is the favorite, and he's actually a little bit bigger of a favorite than you expected. Minus 350 is his current line.
Wow.
So, Minus comes in at about a plus 275 dog. Heavy favorite for Glenn here.
So you know what I love about this, Pies? I love that we're not giving too much bump anymore to some of the recency bias that we've kind of seen in other fighters, because obviously this guy did lose his last fight, but he looked okay and he went to the decision. We saw a good trade of strikes from both guys. It just he wasn't able to push the pace the way we saw from the other man, and that's what happens in longer fights that are technical strikers. It just lasts longer, and you have to be able to keep up with that pressure. You have to keep up with that pace. That's the problem that I have in this fight, and I think Glenn is going to be able to push that pace way, way, way more. So, finish not so much, but, funny enough, last week we called Deiveson Figueiredo on points and had that judge voted the way he should have. Technically, that would have been the bet of the night. But, in this circumstance, I can't help but feel Rick Glenn getting a knockout or finish seems a little unlikely, but Rick Glenn on points.
Far-fetched, yep.
But Rick Glenn on points looks really good. Carlton being able to last those few rounds, being able to get peppered with shots. These are the two kind of guys that seem like they're going to waste the first round quite a bit with either peppering each other with shots or just getting a feeling out process done, And I think in a fight where you want to look at overs and people on points, that's a great, great fight.
Yeah, and Glenn seems a nice parlay candidate as well. So we'll likely be sprinkling that in along with Glenn in decision.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
Perfect, and that takes us on to the next fight. It is a rescheduled bout that we were supposed to see a few weeks ago. It's Jimmy Flick and Cody Durden. I believe Cody Durden had to withdraw due to some medical issue that I could not find any more information on. It wasn't the Rona, but it was something else that came up. So he did withdraw, but 2-3 weeks later, we're getting this bout again. So we've touched on this before, but Cody Durden is dropping down to flyweight for this for this fight. He did make his UFC debut at bantamweight. He fought Gutierrez, which ended up being a draw. Jimmy Flick has also fought Gutierrez, and he lost in that one. He has been on a 3-fight win streak. He did win Dana White Contender Series, and yeah, what anything else you want to touch on in this one? I know we've touched on it before.
Well, yeah, kind of. So, like, the main thing here is in terms of, weight cuts and stuff like that. Like, we know that he's coming off of a medical leave, right? One thing we touched on there, and one thing we have something to go on, is how other people are betting. And one thing we can definitely say is Cody Durden was definitely the heavy favorite. But at the same time, Jimmy Flick is a proven ground game. He's a good finisher. What I didn't like was Nate Smith Contender Series fight. Nate Smith looked like a guy that was a bit of a fish out of water, but he was still able to get out of a lot of these submissions right up until the third round. And that, to me, is a bit of a concern when that's your primary way of fighting. Durden, the whole thing is, cardio. Can you go that long? Is your striking going to be able to keep? Because, if your striking is good enough to keep the fight standing, that's exactly what you want to do against a guy like Flick. I do think Flick has above average striking than what you would expect from a fighter like him. So that's where I do not believe Flick is getting enough bump. But I still think that, he's probably coming in as the favorite. It's funny to see that, Durden was getting so much bump, in the last fight, but I'm still finding it tough to either look at him as a favorite, both, as a ground fighter, or even as a striker, because even if the Gutierrez fight was kind of on short notice and did tire himself out quite a bit towards the end there, I wasn't impressed with just the overall skill there that to at least win over a fight in Jimmy Flick if it hits, like, say, a second or third round.
Mm-hmm. And so do you remember what the line was for this exact fight a few weeks ago?
No. I might have had it actually written down. I can quickly check it. Give me 1 sec here.
But either way, we don't need to spend too much time on this. I got that line up. I just wanted to see if you had a reference point to what this current line is. So kind of what is your guess for this line?
Yeah, so I still think that Jimmy Flick should be a favorite here, and I want to put him at something closer to maybe a minus 150, minus 160.
Oh, boom. Let's hit that bell, yo. That is right on the money. Give me that bell. So the funny thing I just want to quickly touch on this is that, this exact fight was supposed to happen 2 weeks ago, and Flick closed at a minus 180 in that fight. And I believe he opened at a minus 150 and it was driven to a minus 180. Now this time he's opened at a minus 160. So I'm assuming we could probably expect that similar line movement trajectory going to minus 180.
And it's crazy that Durden was the fighter that a lot of the guys who were picking fights took last time he was supposed to fight.
Mm-hmm. I know we were on Flick, so
that's all that matters, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, and up next, we got a middleweight bout. We got Tefan Nchukwi versus Jamie Pickett. I believe that's how you say the man from Cameroon's name. But, we got two exciting prospects here. And I mean, dare to say some more black-on-black crime. But, two exciting prospects, both fresh off of Dana White Contender Series wins. Tefan comes in with a 4-0 record. The Night Wolves sports an 11-4 record. Both making their UFC debut. Both have great things in their arsenal. What do you got for me, man? Yeah,
so it's funny, right? Like, I didn't want to make you watch two videos on here and do the same thing. So you watched the Pickett fight. Like, I sent you the clip of the Dana White Contender Series against Jonathan, right? Like, that was just beautiful. He just completely rampaged. Yep. So the whole reason I wanted to bring that one up with you is because that was actually his third Contender Series appearance, because he's gone every single year since, I want to say, 2017. Like, that was his third appearance. I don't know if he went back in 2018, but he went 2017, 2019, 2020, and he ended up pulling that off. So this is a good fight for him.
Crazy.
Yeah, I liked the speed that I saw in those strikes, because Tefan, as you have African roots, so I'll go with Nchukwi. He was, a little bit more attack the body hard. I really liked the way he threw such power at the body, but the big thing is, 4-0. You scared me a little. This is a guy that has a bit more experience under his belt. I think Pickett's going to be very hungry after working that hard. He'll get 3 chances on the Contender Series to then come in, have that kind of a performance. That has to drive you to hit a new level. And that's the thing with Nchukwi. Is I want to see if you can do the damage that I saw you do in your Contender Series appearance to a guy like this. So with that said, I did send you a video of Nchukwi's highlights. So go ahead and play that for me. So you're just going to play that to 18 seconds, then go ahead and just skip right to 30 seconds. But that's like really good stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and watch that with you right now.
Yeah, so right in line with what you're saying, real attacks to the body here.
Yeah, and so like this video does start off with his contender series, and so again, right, like that's not a UFC contender there, like, but again, these are really good strikes that any man that's eating these to the body is gonna feel it, and muscular guys, bigger guys, like those are the guys that feel it the most because they need so much more oxygen to kind of pump those muscles and keep them going for all those rounds, right? But there you go. So
oh wow.
Yeah. Like
wow.
he absolutely.
They got to him in the end, They got to him in the end.
Yeah, right. Like it's really this is probably one of the most underrated fights in the card. You're just not hearing anybody talk about it, but like guys, even before we get into like individual lines, like one thing I need you to keep a note of is the under in this fight. You've got a 4-0 fighter who has all the power in the world, especially to the body, to kind of go in there, be raw, and see what he can do in the UFC, versus a guy who's kind of a little older, well, not even older, just like experienced and been fighting so long to get this shot. 3 Dana White Contender Series to get this chance.
Yeah.
Like, he's going in there hungry. So I just think with what they both bring to the table, like definitely, I don't know if we have those lines yet because you were saying, 256, good chance we're getting those just for that card, but I would love...
Yeah, no, only preliminary lines are available. No round of victory or method of victory or fight to go the distance is available yet.
So with that said, like one thing I want you to keep in mind is that under, like I really want us to keep an eye out for that because I just see skill-wise, regardless of who comes out here, kind of how we talk about unders and overs, right? Like it's more of an event bet than anything. It's just everything plays out, circumstantially for that unless both guys get tired as hell and then just no punches are doing damage by the 3rd round. And, you're just counting points at that point, but that's a close fight at the end of the day. And you don't want to be the guy on either side trying to call that either way, So I think you can hedge that very well.
Especially since both guys have that finishing power. And so let's dive right into the line there. Who do you see as the favorite in this one? And, by how much? This one's going to be interesting, in my opinion.
Is it? Okay, so here's the thing.
I think so.
So, it's so funny, Pies. I really was like, 4-0 fighter, 26 years old. He looked so good in some of that recency bias, right? But then I thought, veteran, 32-year-old, 3 Contender Series. Like, that's where I want to go with the favorite. But, again, it's all about guessing Vegas. So, I'm going to say your boy in Chiqui at minus 115.
So my boy from Cameroon is getting a lot of hype for this one. Man. A lot of hype. Yeah. Okay. So he is actually a minus 335 favorite. Yo. That line has not moved. It has stayed put.
Wow, Paisan. I'll be quite frank. I find that to be an absolute disrespectful line, but at the same time, we don't really know what we've seen from Pickett. The fact is, Dana White Contender Series are his highest level of fight. So there's probably some value to that. But I just think that from what we've seen from both guys, if Pickett comes in with that same hunger and has that experience, I'm sorry, but minus 300 for a guy that's 4-0 at 26 years old. I mean, you gave it to Figueiredo, so let's see what you do, Vegas.
Yeah, we might have a live dog here, man, at plus 250, plus 275 in such an unpredictable fight with so much uncertainty and not a lot of history to go on. We might actually have a good live dog there, but stay tuned for that. And it does look like our initial lean is on the under and knowing the fight won't go the distance. All right. And so that takes us right into the next fight. We have Amin Zahabi, some more Beaver bias there, fighting out of Montreal, Canada. He's taking on Draco Malfoy, Draco Rodriguez.
I love you because when I see that name, I did the exact same thing in my head. I can't lie. Draco Malfoy, for some reason, this kid turned into some blonde English kid. I don't know why, but that's exactly what I saw, too.
I'm not going to lie. I thought that was a made-up name by J.K. Rowling, and now to see it in somebody else, I'm like, no, that was an actual name. So, our boy here, he's fresh out of the Dana White Contender Series. He won against Mana Martinez. He's making his UFC debut. He's 24 years old. Should be a very interesting and exciting prospect for sure. He's taking on Zahabi, who made his UFC debut back in 2017. So that was a decision win against Reginaldo Vieira. But since then, I mean, he's only fought twice. That's 2 fights in 3 years. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what the reasoning is behind the layoff or whatnot, but both of those were losses. Since his UFC debut, he lost to Ricardo Ramos by KO, and man, that was actually on the GSP Bisping card. Mm-hmm. Like, when's the last time you heard those names other than in commentating? That's so crazy.
Or in Khabib gossip.
Yeah, exactly. You seen GSP's latest videos with the gray hair? Yeah. A lot of people saying online he looks like a lesbian, but I'm not going to dive into that because GFC is my boy. But so, that was a while ago, and, more recently he lost to Vince Morales in decision. Overall, I see this as being just a tough one for a Canadian boy, just not having a lot of reps recently. Prove me wrong here.
So it's funny. I'm about to blow your mind. So I don't know if you remember, but back in GSP's heyday, his coaching staff actually grew a lot of popularity. Do you remember the name Faraz Zahabi?
Yeah, it sounds real familiar.
Yeah, that's his brother. So Ayman Zahabi is also trains with Georges St. Pierre and is coached by his brother, Faraz Zahabi.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
So they train
that Montreal connection right there, eh?
Yeah, so they all train together. Zahabi, like you said, hasn't fight much. I did a bit of digging into that. Not only did I watch the last 2 fights, he got absolutely decked out by a spinning elbow, a complete back elbow right to the face, just complete out. And then the next fight, just the more technical fighter really took it to him. What I enjoyed about that fight, and it's kind of against him a little bit, was he was so confident that he won that fight. Just hella confident. And then when he lost that decision, he was just so upset. And I actually did some digging into the stats. And frankly, when you look at the numbers themselves, the only round he might have been able to steal was maybe the second because he had a takedown. But in the rest of those, they were pretty inactive rounds for the most part, with combined strikes of under 30 in the first and third rounds. But at the same time, I really enjoyed seeing how Moraes was able to finish that fight. I think he put up closer to 15 to 20 total strikes, whereas Zahabi came up with not even 10. So when you look at the fight from a complete round by round standpoint, yeah, he might have stolen that second, but that first and third was not going his way, and you came away with the unanimous 29-20 across the board. So it was just funny to rewatch that fight, and then now see him kind of complain about that, revisit the card, and revisit the numbers of the strikes themselves, and just see that he was completely outpointed. Where I'm going with this, funny enough, you actually have a memory of Rodriguez that you don't even know, but Draco Rodriguez is actually a fighter that I was working on something for us, and the Contender Series was on, and I was just quickly watching it on the second monitor here while I was editing our stuff, and you just weren't able to get it in time. But we took that Contender Series bet on Rodriguez as a dog because the other guy was so good, and I just watched some quick tape on it while I was working on our stuff. I'm like, no, whoa with that dog. And he ended up and what's funny is I loved what he did. He locked in the triangle, and no matter what was done against him, he was able to kind of keep the classic slam, right? Lift him up, put him down. Wasn't able to do that. Punches to the face while he was not phased. He was able to keep finding ways to lock up that triangle. He was grabbing the leg the way he should to keep that body tight. Everything about the technique there was just about, it's the way I make fun about Charles Oliveira, the way I kind of jokingly said, I've seen him get punched in the face regularly just to lock up that submission. Very similar mindset, right? The idea there that, anything that he was trying to do to get out of it just wasn't working for him, and boom, 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 basically went out, saw the tap, it was done. He got the win. I actually really like him in this fight. I think it's a terrible fight for Zahabi. I think this might be one where we're seeing, again, the older fighter kind of making his return to the UFC because there happens to be chances available. I'm not saying that he wouldn't ever be able to fight in the UFC, more so that right now is a great chance. They're cutting fighters like crazy because they brought in so many, but at the same time, there's only so many people willing to fight. So that's who you're seeing kind of the people getting weeded out, if you will. I think you're going to see, people with kind of rough records, people that aren't willing to fight, that kind of thing. But, all the power to Zabi to try and get in there to rewrite the career. But, I think I've set you up real well for these odds now.
Yeah, and kind of touching on that, submission, take the pain. We kind of saw that in Chase Hooper last week as well. He looked to be losing the fight for the most part, just trying to get those submissions and everything locked in. Once he did finally get it locked in, it was easy win for him. So that's a pretty cool, interesting concept that you touched on there. In terms of these odds, where do you see it landing? Who's the Vegas favorite and by how much?
Yeah, so like I don't even want to waste time, Pies. Like there's just zero chance of, in my opinion, of Zahavi being the favorite here. There's just nothing really to go on. You don't have the UFC background. All you really have is the coaching and maybe, potential that you were talking about maybe a year or two ago. So I'm actually going to go with my KOTC veteran, Andrejko Rodriguez. I love the Contender Series performance. I want him to do well. So I'm going with Rodriguez as a minus 130 favorite. I have a feeling I'm not even being, strict enough, or as you say, hard on Zahavi, but yeah, that could be low.
It is a tad low, still kind of right on the barrier of your 50-point basis range, but he's a minus 188 favorite, and it has not moved. Yeah, in the last 48 hours, it has stayed put. So it looks like he's going to be locked in at a minus 188 favorite.
I'll be honest, man. Like that's a strong line, and one thing that we actually did last week, and we've been trying to get better at, is as we start to explore these lines live, and even getting exposure to some of the more prop style bets, like keeping a lock on them and keeping a watch on them to get them in, because that's one, dude, where that could move against us, I think, and it's hard for us to not predict that anymore because we just see it happen every single week. The movement in that Souza Holland line was kind of interesting to watch too, depending on which way you were trying to bet. But I think this is one where, at minus 188, very similar to Mackenzie Dern. I mean, she actually didn't come as close to finishing at all as some might have thought. And it looks like she wanted to practice her striking there, but very similar line, right? The minus 188s. I do see him, being able to exploit that line very similarly, if not do even better.
Yeah, and I would not be shocked to wake up on Saturday and see that as a minus 200, minus 225.
Exactly, my man. Exactly.
Perfect. All right, and then up next, we got a middleweight bout. We got Daron Nguyen taking on Antonio Arroyo. And so looking at this fight, the first thing that obviously stood out to me is the huge height and reach advantage that Arroyo has. Nguyen comes in at a much smaller dude at 5'6", against the towering 6'3" of Arroyo.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you're itching to touch on something here. So I'll let you dive right in right now before I finish.
No, go ahead. I got a beautiful punchline for you. Like I got a little mini story about this one too for you. That's gonna be great.
All right, so Nguyen has a 6-2 record, but it is a 1-2 record in the UFC. He won his debut back in 2019, but since has suffered 2 losses. Darren Stewart and Gerald Mearshart. Is that his name, Mearshart?
You remember him, right? He's the guy that got destroyed by Khamzat in that last fight.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so those are basically his 2 losses. Arroyo comes in. He won the Contender Series in 2019. He lost his UFC debut in this year, to Andre Muniz. And he's had 3 canceled bouts in 2020. So I'm sure this guy's just itching to get back into the ring. Give us a little more on this one.
Yeah, so, I mean, here's the thing about this fight. So first thing I want to touch on, this is not on you. They are middleweights, but this is actually catchweight fight at 195.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
and it's funny. So, like, to be honest, Daron Nguyen actually started at light heavyweight, worked his way down. And it's so funny, man. But can you guess,
at 5'6"? At 5'6"?
Yo, can you guess the training camp that he trains at? Think about this. If I showed you clips, like there's going to be clips I'm going to pull up of Darren, but it's going to be hilarious. But if there was a spoof of Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, starring Daniel Cormier, do you know who's playing Mini-Me? Do you know who's playing Mini-Me? Because I do. I definitely know.
And in turn, I know now.
And so, yeah, bro, he's fighting at an AKA. He's definitely one of Daniel Cormier's boys.
What a great comparison.
Right?
What
dude,
a great comparison.
It's funny because, like, what made me die inside is it's like, as much as I wanted to make the comparison, just generally, the fact that they both train at AKA together is hilarious. He's a decorated wrestler, right? Decorated wrestler. Took on, his last bout was actually a wrestling bout against a very, very highly decorated wrestler before he kind of jumping back to MMA right now with the UFC. But, like, he's having struggles as an MMA fighter. He is that small at some of these weight classes, and to be honest, the one way he's kind of getting in there is similar to Cormier, where he's kind of got the wrestling to keep him up and keep him standing and maybe grapple with the best of them, but he's got to throw. He's got to beat certain like people's reaches. Like, unfortunately, at 5'11" and fighting a bunch of 6'3", 6'4" guys, like, you got to get in there. And so, in a mini-me version, here we have Darren Nguyen trying to do that. Now, there's a couple things I hate for him in this fight. I absolutely hate for him. Arroyo is an absolute beast. His kicks are solid. And if you remember, he was supposed to fight Eric Anders, and we were touching on that part of his game in that breakdown, but unfortunately that fight fell apart because I think Eric Anders actually fell ill. But now Arroyo's getting to come back in here. I mean, it's funny, right? Because he's actually got really good size for a middleweight, and so he doesn't even have to cut down to the 185.
Yeah.
This guy, it's just so funny. Imagine being like under 6 foot by that much and being very relieved that you don't have to cut the extra 10 pounds to make 185 at middleweight. Like, you have way bigger fish to fry, homie. But, I mean, at the same time, I think he's...
Maybe you shouldn't be frying too many fish right now.
Yeah, right? Like, I think plant-based is way to go, but for now, like... It's like, he's got a small sample size, right? So the one thing I wanted to touch on is he started 6-0. He got wins at Legacy, he got wins at Bellator, he's got wins at the UFC. And what's really funny is, I don't know if you remember, but Oscar De La Hoya threw a really whack-ass Golden Boy Promotions MMA card that featured a Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz Part 3. I mean, I don't even know if I want to count that, but he won there as well. So that's the thing, right? As much as we want to talk about it, I wanted to follow it up with, like, the good things, right? Like, we're talking extremely decorated wrestler, still a 6-2 fighter, but 6 straight wins before those 2 UFC losses, and making to UFC and losing twice is not such a big deal. So going into Arroyo, utilizing those kicks, keeping the distance, like, it's just, my heart goes out to Darren Nguyen. Like, I couldn't have picked a worse matchup for him. Taller fighter, heavy kicks. Darren Nguyen has looked injured from body strikes on multiple occasions. The worst part about it is he fights small too, right? Like, he likes to get in like a Tyson. He's going to lunge forward for his big power strikes. And I think Arroyo's going to be able to deal with that. I just cannot see Nguyen having the striking ability to knock out a guy like Arroyo. And that's why he was actually built to fight a guy like it boggles my mind that a guy that was supposed to fight Eric Anders is going to fight Darren Nguyen. Like, this is like looking like father and son, and I'm watching them fight. Like, it's crazy, but this probably sets up the lines pretty well. But just to kind of even dabble a little bit more on the plus side, if you look at Tapology's rankings for middleweights, Darren Nguyen is the 53rd ranked middleweight worldwide, and Antonio Arroyo is only ranked 96. So keep that in mind.
Wow. That is pretty nuts, and I'm really looking forward to seeing if Arroyo can use, kind of stay at a distance, not fall into, the fence, and having that heavy body on him. In terms of a line, who do you see as the favorite here?
It's, Pies, it's just so difficult for me to give Nguyen a line of a favorite. Like, if he's the favorite, it would boggle my mind. There's nothing in tape that tells me that, especially from a skill standpoint, that this is a fight that on paper he can win. He needs a specific game plan of how to take out a fighter like Arroyo. That's what needs to happen for him to get that win. And to me, that is like a plus 150 to a plus 200 dog minimum. So with that said, I have to go Arroyo minus 200.
Wow, I'll give you the bell for that one because it's right in the 50-point range. Let's knock out that bell right now. Arroyo comes in actually at what might actually be a very enticing line. It's minus 160.
Wow.
I think that's like, enough in a range to just lock in right now.
Lock it in, Pies. Lock it in. I lock it in. First lock in ever on a Tuesday. Lock it in. Arroyo minus 160. The striking is going to be fierce. And the worst thing about it is that we've seen our boy Nguyen fight recently. Whereas with Arroyo, the time to like get better and better. Like the fact that we were supposed to see him fight and he's still been back at camp. Like, are you kidding me? Lock that in. Lock that in.
Perfect. I'm glad you feel the same way because that was my initial lean, and let's get it. I'm down.
Lock that in. Beautiful, Pies. Beautiful. Oof.
And that brings us into our next fight, a nice middleweight bout. We got Carl Roberson coming in against Dalcha Lungiambala. Sorry, I was just so stressed about saying that name.
Yeah, you said Robertson. Yeah.
So, Baby K, he comes in sporting that 9-3 record. He's 4-3 in the UFC, which kind of might catch you off guard. But if you dive a little bit deeper into those losses, man, they are serious losses. He lost to Glover Teixeira. He did lose to Marvin Vettori, who we actually just saw take on Hermansson in the main event and win pretty handedly. So these are pretty credible losses from serious contenders.
Exactly.
So I'm trying not to look too much into those. On the flip side, we got Dalcha fighting out of the Republic of Congo. Sports a 10-2 record, but he's 1-1 in the UFC. He won his debut against Daquan Townsend, but then lost to Ankalaev, who kicked him in the face, I think, and knocked him out. And so that was back in 2019. This is his first fight in 2020, and he is moving down a weight class. So I'm very curious to see what we get from Lungiambala here. But Carl Roberson seems to be, a pretty strong contender in this fight. What do you see divulging here?
Yeah, so it's funny, right? Because for us, we know a lot of the surrounding fighters that kind of go into this fight. So it's kind of like, let's just pick these guys apart a little bit by, what we've seen from the fighters they've fought. The one thing I want to point out about your boy Lungiambala is, Magomed Ankalaev is the guy that fought, Kutilaba, remember the referee who, when he was pretending to be knocked out, ended up right, and then they ended up fighting again. They fought second time, and we pounded him even at I remember minus 334. I won't forget it. We still took, because that was what the line ended at, and it's not when it opened. It was still a minus 2 something, and it closed at that, and we were still going to put that in a parlay. And that is Dawson's loss. So you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a talented striker. That's a guy who's working his way up in actual rankings at the UFC. So even though he's got that loss, that's a great little tidbit on him. On the flip side, his third round ground and pound loss to Daquan Townsend. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Daquan Townsend at this point, like the 28, the 20 plus record with, less than like 15 losses always looks good on paper, right? But there's a lot of guys the tail end of their careers with those records. That's what we always have to remember. There's guys like Charles Oliveira with similar records like that who are about to enter their prime at 30 something years old. So, let's not go there. So that's what I'm trying to do. With a grain of salt. Right? That's the whole point. So when you're talking about wins and losses, like, unfortunately, beat really, really bottom of the barrel UFC competition in the third round, but also lost to top tier UFC competition in the third round. You know what I mean? So there's this weird thing about him where do we see him being as a, top tier fighter? Because when it comes to median, he's kind of smack down middle anyway in those one-on-one fights. So now let's look at Carl Roberson, right? Him and Marvin Vettori with that long feud, right? With him getting sick, and then he missed the weights and couldn't end up fighting. So Marvin Vettori had to put off his entire year to just fight this one guy. Like, it was really tough for him. And he took it out on him. Like, that was first round. Like, that was a demolition. And so, the one thing I don't like about Carl Roberson, and you pointed out great, when you dive into the losses, those 3 losses are against very, very good fighters, all-around fighters who have shown great ground game for the weight class and proved it against him. That's the big thing for me. I really feel like, first-round submissions of that, like, there's a consistency there. I think he makes bad judgment calls. I think he has, a bit of mental game to learn when it comes to the octagon. And that's what maybe separates him from the elite fighters, which makes this a very interesting fight. Because at first glance, I can see people just absolutely pounding Dalcha. But when you look, but when you look at Carl Roberson's career and how he's fought, he's a weird looking dude when he's fighting. Half the time he looks like, he's half asleep, half knocked out. But even his movement against Marvin Vettori, Marvin Vettori was very aggressive. He was very much able to get in. But Marvin Vettori went to a decision with Israel Adesanya. Like, these are the fighters he's losing to. I'm okay with saying this is a very, very close fight. Very close.
Yeah, and so let's dive right into the odds there. Who do you see as the favorite in this one?
And it's funny you asked me that, right? Because in my mind right now, off of my tongue, I was going to say something. And then I look at my notes and I honestly went the other way. And it's crazy how much I went the other way. So this is the one thing I'll say. Do you remember Alan Bodo? Remember the name? So he's the guy that Tom Aspinall smashed in his last fight, right?
Yep.
You remember me showing you a highlight of Alan Bodo getting absolutely slept. Like punch lands and the man like just falls forward asleep. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
This is the guy that did that.
Okay.
And so that's where okay, don't see this fight going to the ground. If Roberson is smart and he's able to use the grappling, I would totally consider taking the fight to the ground with this guy. But I don't think he does. I don't see that mental fortitude there. That's why I'm going to go with your boy Dalcha as the favorite at actually minus 180 based on my notes.
Wow. So if I'm going to slap you in the face with this line, does that mean we're taking the boy from Congo here?
Oh, God.
So Baby K actually comes in at a minus 275 favorite.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That lines up with my personal take on the line. I was wondering if maybe there was some Vegas bias to what is. And you know what's interesting, Pies, is what we might see as hype in some of these knockouts. We have to remember that the average bettor is not finding that highlight.
Not seeing them, yeah.
Yeah, so, and maybe that's something for even me to consider when I'm making these lines, because for me to even think of Roberson as the dog, but then think of that as like the betting line, it has a lot to do with me assuming that the research that I'm doing, the things that I'm looking at is probably what bettors and Vegas are doing when they're going into these lines, but clearly not the case. Going back to what I'm saying, would I consider a sprinkle on that? 100%.
And we'd probably look at the under in this one as well.
100%.
And that takes us to the ladies' prelim fight. We have Penny Kianzad coming in against Chase Young's younger sister, our girl, Sijara Eubanks. I think we've seen her a few times in 2020. Oh, yeah, man. Got to give her that bump. And she's been impressive, too. I'm not going to lie. I've liked what I've seen from her thus far this year. And, just doing a little digging into this whole division kind of just seems like it's just a rotating division. So Eubanks beat Julia Alvia a couple months ago, who was actually the last person to hand Penny a loss. And then Eubanks lost to Beth Correa, who's Pettis' most recent win. It's just such a rotating circle that you can't really track. But, Eubanks, she did lose, a real tough one to Ketlin Vieira last that we saw. And I'm curious to see if she can bounce back, because the first one we saw her in 2020 was a dominating performance.
Yeah, so what's funny about that fight is, unfortunately, she just wasn't able to work the ground game that we kind of saw her use in upsetting Julia Alvia. Like, that was a pretty solid upset that she stole, but then against Ketlin Vieira. And the thing about Ketlin Vieira, remember we talked about her, right? Like, she was the girl that was pretty much on the verge of title contention before kind of the loss and like the falling out or whatever it was, right? So like that's what's interesting about looking at Ketlin Vieira in general as a fighter now, as she's trying to make her comeback. But you said it best, man. Like in a lot of these divisions, when the same fighters have to keep going back and forth, like Beth Correa is like someone that I really kind of she is very much personifying exactly what you're describing. And so I'm not gonna lie, the moment I see someone had lost to her in the later part of her career, I'm a little concerned. So I'm gonna add that to my analysis of this fight. Like I do feel a little bit bad about that, but at the same time, like Penny, last 2 wins, Jessica Rose Clark, Beth Correa, these are good wins. Only 2 losses, Macy Jason on a tough finale, and Julia Alvia, right? So for me, I like this fight. I like this fight from a technical standpoint from both fighters, but I do think that Penny has a lot of edge here. I think that she's going to have a size advantage. I think she's going to just need to watch it for wrestling. That's the whole point. With Sijara Eubanks, just avoid the wrestling, avoid that ground and pound. She's got cardio for days. She's going to be able to ride you out. So when you only lose to when you only lose to good fighters and you've kind of got that all-around game that mixes up well with those kinds of fighters, that's a pretty good chance against a fighter like Sijara. So, if I'm Sijara Eubanks, I'm pushing this girl up against the fence nonstop. I'm trying to get that takedown nonstop. Yeah. My favorite position is going to be taking down from the clinch, get her up against the fence, and maybe fill her some shots over the course of the round. If I got to take it to the next round, I got to take the next round, maybe look for submission, stuff like that. There's no reason for me to be standing up to try and get in there. I really think, it could go either way just because of how you just described how some of the fights do work out, especially in the female divisions. And this is one of those prototypical fights where you have like striker, wrestler, you have cardio versus, what happens on the ground versus, throwing a lot of strikes, combo strikes over the course of 2 rounds. Like, how does the third round look? That's the stuff that really does make the difference in female fights. And it's hard to, pinpoint that. Like, that's why sometimes even when I'm watching tape, a lot of the time, especially in older fights, I usually just go to the third round. If I know that a fight's going to be going to a decision anyway, I like to see what a person looks like for the last 5 minutes of a fight. That's really important.
Yeah. It's the lasting impression that the judge has as well, right? So there seems to hold more weight in that final round as well. So let's dive right into the odds here. This is going to be a tricky one, but who do you see as the favorite and by how much?
Yeah, so like, and in the way I saw it, I think Kenton has a chance to make this a stand-up war. She has the ability to kind of, distance strike. I think Sijara Eubanks, the problem with her, she does push forward really well, but I think she never really gets that overall credit. And in this fight, I can't really give her the credit either. So I'm going to go with Penny Kansan. I'm going to go with Penny Kansan as the favorite, and not by much to kind of sneak it into an underdog line if I need to. So I would go with a -120 on Penny.
So Sijara actually does come in as the favorite. There is a lot of hype around her. Yeah, she's a -165 favorite in this one. So there might be some value on the dog given what an unpredictable fight this is, right?
There is, man, because like the whole point for me, it's like, let's go back and watch more of Penny's like losses to some of these bigger fighters, right? Like some of the bigger names, because
heavier.
Like we want to know, like, how does she deal with those types of opportunities, or I guess you should say some of those lapses in judgment that get you to the ground. Are you quick to get back to your feet? Because against like Eubanks, who kind of uses the technical side as opposed to just power, she's really good at keeping on the ground. And she's like, with the thing with women fights, it's like it's very tough to have all these like strong ground and pound type strikes throughout the whole fight. But like you're going to see her get those point strikes, and that's what's going to matter.
Yeah. So stay tuned for that one, but it does look like we may have a live dog here. And so that takes us into the main card. We did lose the main event on the prelim card, unfortunately. We were really looking forward to this one. It was supposed to be Bilal Muhammad against Diego Lima, but Muhammad did test positive for COVID, so we are going to miss out on this one.
My New York boy, go check out his podcast. He's going to be recording a lot more for the next little week, if you ask me, so go check him out.
Man, that was going to be the lock of my century if this was in Abu Dhabi, man. We're not fading a Muhammad in Abu Dhabi, but we were robbed of the fight anyways. So.
I don't think a Muhammad is fading in Abu Dhabi.
Absolutely. And so that takes us into the main event, the main card. And kicking us off is a nice fight between Anthony Pettis and Alex Morono. So Pettis, he's a beast. We all know about him. What can we say? He's 23-10 record. He's been around the block. If you look at those 10 losses, man, I'm going to list these off. Dos Anjos, Alvarez, Barbosa, Max Holloway twice, Dustin Poirier, Tony Ferguson, Nate Diaz. Like, look at these names, man. If those are your 10 losses, I mean, all the power to you. You're a beast. And he takes down some of the greats too as well. His most recent fight, he took down Cowboy Cerrone. I believe he's taken him down twice. So this is going to be a handful for Morono for sure, especially because Pettis looked great in his last fight as well. Morono, this is a guy who was rolling, man. He was rolling up until his fight against Chaos Williams. He was just dealing with dudes, and that was a rude awakening for him. Chaos dealt with him with ease early. And I think that was a bit of a rude awakening for him. He's itching. He got back on track. He did fight Reese McKee, which we saw. I think we took him there as well. And he did get back on track. That was last month. So this is a huge, quick turnaround for him as well. And not going to be an easy one against Anthony Pettis.
Yeah, so what really shocks me about this one is there's already some leans out there, and people are definitely betting against Pettis. And for me, I'm going to be quite honest with you. I have not watched much tape on Pettis. I've watched his entire career. I don't think I need to go back and watch his last fight because I know how Pettis fights. I've watched Morono's, most recent fights. And funny story, like going back into Morono's career, I actually did a prospect piece for MMA Sucker back in the day in that 2016 UFC debut against Kyle Noak. That was a fight where I ended up like talking about him being like, he should come out with the win. He won that via split. And, obviously we know how he's done since then, losing to certain types of fighters that kind of make you wonder, what is the key to beat him? Because if he was such a highly touted prospect, clearly guys are figuring out pretty quickly. So when I look at him, the way Reese McKee fights, right? Long, lanky, point striker kind of thing, right? Moreno definitely pushes forward. He likes to get in there. Well, if you don't have your hands up, if you're not very technical with your defense, we know what happens. A guy like Chaos Williams had his way with him. So this is the part that really throws me off. And I'm wondering what the line looks like, because I haven't seen lines, but I've seen people take Moreno already. And I'm just wondering why, because Pettis is definitely a fighter who understands what it takes to win. He's been a champion. He's fought at multiple weight classes. Like, that's the part where people are we're hard on him because of what he shows in like an embedded. Like, don't be eating steaks and missing weight. Like, that just makes me cringe. Like, it's so funny, but this guy showed off a steak knife with his name on it when he's a consistent culprit for having issues. Like, it's just like, buddy, like you're getting old, right? Like, it's just not as easy to move that weight off your body. It's just that simple. The knockouts against Benson, like, this kid made a name for himself, for his family. His brother's a fighter, and he's finding success. So, this is a borderline generational type of talent, right? Like, he's going to be the cream of the crop for a while, and there's a chance that he's good enough that some of the next generation of his family kind of come up. Like, that's how good he is and was. And, I'm excited to see what he brings to this fight, because it's one of the first times we're seeing him kind of play weirdly gatekeeper, because Moreno, I believe, is a fighter that needs to kind of see what he can do against the higher tier. And if he gets this win, despite losing to a guy like Chaos Williams, like Chaos Williams is going to be a step ahead every time now, because he's going to get events like he did tonight or again on Saturday. But that's where you're going to see them kind of separate. Remember, we talked about this once. I explained it to you, how that scheduling, you'll always notice, Pies, how some guys who have fought each other will always end up on the same cards. You know what I mean? Like, it seems to be like such a focal point of scheduling, and it makes sense to me. Like, obviously it makes sense. So, for Moreno to be a few fights earlier against a guy like Pettis, you could make the argument that Chaos Williams, he definitely has a guy that he has to take on that's maybe more of a come up. But Moreno has a lot to gain from beating a guy like Pettis.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if we're going to dive right into some biggie tracks, for the opening for some of these guys, a perfect one for Morono is one more chance. You know what I mean? Let's give this guy one more chance to see if he can get back into that title contention.
That's a great one, because the real issue with him, right? And I think that's why he's getting a fight like this earlier in the card. It's like, go out there, see if you can beat, a Anthony Pettis, who's coming off of, say, a fight against, a very respectable Thompson. I'll never say anything ill about him, but again, like, that's a recoverable fight. Like, that's him trying to get back into the winning ways. So I am curious where that line kind of sits, and it's funny because
let's jump right into it. Yeah.
So I'm gonna drop my track for the line to my boy Anthony Pettis, Dangerous MCs, featuring my mans, and we're gonna go with Anthony Pettis at a minus 150.
Ooh, a little bit more boost for him. A little bit more boost for that man. He's actually coming in at a minus 225 favorite. That's a pretty heavy favorite, in my opinion.
For Anthony?
For Anthony Pettis, yeah.
Yeah, you know what, man? I'm very happy with that line. And the only reason I didn't put it that high, and I know I've been criticized already for how low my lines are, and this card has not been any different, so I apologize already. But, I mean, that is an example of where it looks exactly the way it should, and I believe it's a huge upset if Moreno pulls it off. In fact, like, him getting this fight is so big after the Chaos loss that he has everything to gain. So, going back to some of the previous fights you've mentioned, Pies, I'm going to say that by the end of this evening, you're going to have some bets to lock in ASAP.
Yeah, and to be honest, Morono probably got this fight because of that recent battle with McKee within the last month. Had he not decided to rush that out in 2020, we probably wouldn't be seeing him this weekend.
Exactly.
And so that moves us on to our first women's bout on the main card here. And guess what? Our girl Jillian Robertson is back. The Canadian Beaver bias is back. She looked great in her red hair, earlier in the year, and we're excited to see her fight again. She's fresh off that win against Botello. She looks to keep that momentum going in 2020. She did beat Courtney Casey in July, so it's been a successful year. Let's see if she can finish off 3-0. On the flip side, we see Taila Santos. She was supposed to take on Montana De La Rosa earlier. We were really excited about that one, but it did not happen. Montana had to pull out of that one. So Santos now comes in fighting Jillian Robertson. Probably a little bit tougher of an opponent for her. She does sport that 16-1 record, which we touched on before. Not sure the true credibility of some of these leagues and where she's fighting to get that record. But, she did recently beat Molly McCann. She is on her come up. So I'm curious to see where your thoughts are on this one.
Yeah, so, let me get right into it the way I did last time. You find me a tape of Astra FC, I swear I will wire you $20. Find me a tape of this woman. I will wire you $20. I will take on any fees that are associated with that $20. Now, looking at who she's lost to, Mara Barella, a split decision loss. Go look at Mara Barella and her record. My heart goes out to her, but you are definitely the funniest version of a gatekeeper because at the end of the day, you really are the person that kind of, once people beat you, they get to the next level. And it just happens a lot. So, unfortunately, Taylor's only loss is to her. So for me, I got a wonderful biggie track for Jillian, and I'm going to introduce it before I get into her, but it's Let Me Get Down with Missy Elliott and Craig Mack, and let me tell you why.
Oh,
if this fight gets to the ground, I think she has her way, bro. I think Taila Santos is going to try to strike her with her. We saw Jillian be able to eat a lot of strikes in the beginning of her fight last time, which was a great sign for us because we obviously took her against, Pollyanna Botello. So she ate those strikes, and she was able to. But the moment the fight got to the ground, the American top team, Canadian prodigy, was able to get down. So, in light of our boy Biggie, in light of your Merry Christmas sweater, Jillian Robertson, let me get down if you feel me.
Amazing. I love it, bro. That's a beautiful one. 100%. And so let's dive right into the lines here. Who's the favorite in this one, man?
It's got to be Jillian Anderson. And if you don't give me a line right now of minus 250, I'm slapping somebody.
Dude, the moment I saw this line, I knew on air you would stop me to go lay it. I knew you would, and
what do you
you're
mean?
going
What do you mean?
anyways.
Yeah.
It's a pick'em. It's a straight pick'em.
Yo,
it's minus 110 both sides.
So here, you know what? Hey guys, this is what we're gonna do right now. We already laid Arroyo, right? Yo, Pies, I'm gonna actually call right now. Let's do a parlay of Arroyo, Pettis, and Robertson.
Lock it in early, eh?
Yeah. I think those three right now. Let's get into this next fight. Pies usually, I've been very bad at this because of how much we're trying to bounce, but there's going to be a nice little full card for this one, and I think this is a card where, on paper, man,
there's a lot of value.
Yeah, there's some serious value here. And so if I was to lock in a parlay right now on this card without looking at anything else, I'm sorry, but Jillian Robertson, Anthony Pettis, and Antonio Arroyo, just that jumps out at me like, a nice piece of chocolate cake, because you know how I love my chocolate cake.
Oh, man. You're preaching to the choir here. I like locking these things early. I hate missing out on line value. It's the thing that bothers me the most. So let's lock it in. Can't believe she's a minus 110. I'm probably going to be taking her straight as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so that moves us in directly to this heavyweight bout. Couple dudes who are going to throw, so I'm going to preface it with my biggie track, Flavor in Your Ear.
Ooh,
There's
cauliflower flavor. It's definitely cauliflower flavor.
You got it, man. There's going to be a lot of flavor in the ear in this one. This is going to be a straight slobber knocker. I'm pumped about this one. We got Marcin Taibura, 3-fight win streak. He beat Spivak, Grishin, most recently Ben Rothwell. Prior to that, he had lost 4 of 5, so it's great to see that he's kind of adjusted his game, got back onto his winning ways, and, in that fight streak loss, he lost to our boy, the Black Beast, right? So nothing to be too disappointed with there. Hardy, on the flip side, he's on a roll, man. I know, we have our choice words about him and his history, but nothing can take away from the roll that he's on. he made easy work of Mo Green. That was something that was very impressive. He did get that unanimous victory against De Castro that followed up his loss to Volkov, and that no contest against Asali. I think he did some shady shit in that one. So
yeah, classic.
Exactly. He does seem to be getting, his mojo going, hitting his stride. But what I will say is, an under, anyone? Are we taking an under here?
So, funny enough, these are kind of the fights you want to be very careful of, those unders, right? Because these are the heavyweights you hate. These are the heavyweights that get tired and basically throw what we call technical strikes for 2 rounds. The reason I laugh at that is there's very little technique to it, and more so just trying to land. We can break this down very well.
Just a lack of power.
Yeah, right? And it's funny watching 2 guys who think they still have power throw with power. So you get these grandpa strikes where guys are just... and it's like whoever the smarter guy is to kind of, use the energy correctly to land the right strikes over the course of those last 5 minutes. I mean, it's usually who kind of steals the victory, right? We know what both of these guys want to do. Greg Hardy's going to throw those basic combos. Greg Hardy's going to want to take his head off. Greg Hardy has found ways to employ leg kicks to his game to try and set up those shots. Now, those leg kicks, do I believe that they're going to be technically sound and powerful enough to kind of put a guy like Marcin Taibura out? No. Will they do some damage? Sure. Do I think Tybura can deal with that? 100%. Like, this is a guy that's losing, Fabricio Verdum was hitting championship level at that point, in 2017. So that's where, for me, I can see the losses to the good elite strikers being a problem. I'm sorry to say, I think I'm so over the Greg Hardy hype, and I just never really was on it. I mean, let's talk about a guy like Yorgan De Castro. Is there a guy that makes you laugh more? I'm sorry to say, but his fight, and you know me, I'm very respectful to fighters and martial artists. I am the only reason I am even saying anything about this is even Dana is like, I can't, they're shocked they booked that fight. It was not fun. There was not many strikes thrown. In fact, Yorgan De Castro was coming off of his fight with Greg Hardy before that fight, which just was the ugliest. I was so disappointed and I had no, what's weird? Of sentiment of disappointment when you had no expectations. I had 0 expectations going into that fight, but I was completely disappointed. So with that said, looking at a guy like, Greg Hardy, Yorgan De Castro fight, that went to a decision. What? Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. Maurice Green was having a lot of trouble with power strikes. Do you remember the fight against Gian Vellante? Maurice Green had a lot of trouble with Gian Vellante's power strikes in the first round as well. We know why he won that fight in the 3rd round, and it had nothing to do with how good his striking or stand-up was. Looking at Tybura, so, he's not going to be a stand-and trade from distance kind of guy, but, I was even looking at some things like takedown defense and things like that, and, looking at both of these guys have defensive striking identical, 57%. Striking accuracy, wow. Tybura comes in at 50%. Greg Hardy comes in at 49%. Takedown defense, Tybura comes in at 82%. Greg Hardy comes in at 83%. These guys are so closely matched. So ask me, Pies, where do I see a difference?
Where do you see the difference, brother?
Experience, bro. You can give Hardy size. You can give him all of that, right? 2 inches in reach, a couple inches in height. But where I see this being different is if it's against the fence, who's the better fighter? If this goes to the ground, who's the better fighter? Every fight starts standing, but Marcin Taibura has been in there with guys like Derek Lewis. Do you in your heart believe that Greg Hardy is a harder puncher than Derek Lewis?
No chance.
So this is where, for me, we saw what you did on the come-up, Greg Hardy. You looked great. Contender Series, that kind of stuff, you looked wonderful. You might have single-handedly helped the Contender Series get that big that quickly. So good for you, good for Dana and all that stuff. But looking at these numbers, looking at the experience, at heavyweight, 35 years old isn't even that bad either. So all of those things coming into play, Tybura looking like he's kind of in his second wave of a prime where he's now trying to kind of, make that second wave. I really believe that this is the fight that he can kind of put Hardy down on the ground again.
Are there any odds that you're hoping to get on him to maybe kind of push you in that range?
Oh, so here's the thing. Like, I'm so confident Tybura winning this fight, which is nothing. Like, and I'll be honest, you know how I feel about Greg Hardy as a fighter. This has nothing to do with personally. Like, I truly believe that he's been one of those guys that's been trajected like way too high in a lot of these fights. But he's been lucky against guys like Yorgan De Castro and Maurice Green, who I personally believe are nowhere close to being ranked in the top 20 heavyweights in the UFC. So now we're talking about a guy who's been comfortably sitting in the top 10 to top 15 for a half decade almost. So you see what I'm saying? So that line, let's go with a minus 200. If it's under minus one, like I can't comprehend that. Like, I wouldn't be able to understand Tybura coming in at anything below minus 200. And there's a good chance he does. Hardy gets the bug.
How about a live dog, my friend? How about a live dog?
No way, bro. What do you fucking mean? Sorry, I don't. What?
So yeah, when I did look last night, Greg Hardy was the minus 130 favorite. Tybura came in at a plus 110. Since then, if I look right now, it has dropped. So Tybura is a plus 100 now. Greg Hardy's minus 125. Do not be surprised to see minus 125 for Tybura soon enough.
Yo, pies. Oh my God. Okay, move on to the next fight. But guys, like, these are lines where I'm confused by them, and I don't even think there's more research to be done. I think we're seeing a card of grizzly veterans taking on some very hyped prospects. And Paisan, if you go back to our history, these are the fight cards that we succeeded very well. Very well. And seeing Tybura at a plus 100 against a guy like Greg Hardy makes me very, very, very concerned with, you know, who's drinking on the job and stuff like that. But, you know, that's not my concern, because I just got to take in that plus 100 while it's still out there till the guys who come in, I guess, day shift who are sober and fix all these problems that, you know, a night shift team can usually do. It's crazy, man. That's crazy. I had to go check. I didn't even believe you. I had to go check. Fuck. I'm just blown away, man. And here's the thing, right? So this is my issue with Greg Hardy, right? The camp and everything. Like, he's got everything going for him. Hype, name, American top team coaching. Like, he's got everything going for him. But I'm just so keen on believing that Tybura is the way to go. Little things, you know. You want to get real deep, pies? Let's see how many fighters from American top team have fought and beat Tybura. That's something to consider. Maybe that's the next little wave of information that we might need to see what kind of information that American top team might have as a camp against a fighter like Tybura. You know, scouting report, that kind of thing. Because, you know, if they have like 3 or 4 heavyweights that have gone in and beaten Tybura, we can probably understand why that line looks like that. But whoever's digging that deep, all the power to you.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm sure there's going to be a shit ton of public money on Greg Hardy for sure.
That's where pies, like, you know, every time we talk about him, I say it every single time, that no matter what, the public money seems to go his way. And I truly believe it's because of how scary he looks as a human being.
Yeah, that and people know who he is from the Dallas Cowboys, right? Mm-hmm.
But, like, I mean, here's what's funny for that. Like, imagine going into a fight, like, yeah, sure, I'll take the NFL fighter. Yeah, but you also look like a... Yeah, give my money. Anyway, you know what? Like, I'm going to move on from that.
All right. And so that takes us into our next fight. It's a bantamweight bout. We got Marlon Moraes on one side, and we got Rob Font on the other. So Marlon Moraes, he has a 23-7-1 record. You know, he comes off of a disappointing loss to Sandhagen, which we saw a few months ago. Mm-hmm. But prior to that, you know, he won a split decision against Jose Aldo. And he actually, I'm pretty sure he got a chance for the vacant belt against Cejudo. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, he'll be looking to get back on that championship track. You know, a lot of hype around this guy. On the flip side, we got Rob Font. He comes in at a 17-4 record. 7-3 in the UFC, so he's been around for some time as well. He does have some impressive wins as well. Simon, Sergio Pettis, Almeida, but this will definitely be his toughest opponent yet, in my opinion. What do you see kind of unfolding here?
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head with the bantamweight title fight. So that was kind of his way of sneaking in, but unfortunately he took on my guy Henry Cejudo, where, you know, I'm all about the fight game. He can be whoever he wants to be outside the octagon. Mr. Cringe, I love him. That is a man who I rode to the bank on a regular basis because he is elite. He is a Daniel Cormier without the John Jones in his life. Like, that's just who he is. He is phenomenal. So with that said, that is Marlon Moraes' loss. Now, going into Corey Sandhagen, you know, Corey Sandhagen for me is one of my favorite fighters, and it's funny because I like his style. I like the way he kind of goes about the fight game, more outside than inside, but he's so deadly inside, right? Calculated, very much picks his spots. I like guys like that at the smaller weight classes because, you know, you could go crazy with all that energy, you know, and all that, like, less weight, speed. Like, you're able to just have so much output. He fights like almost like Ciro Gann fought against.
I was going to say, yeah.
You know, like the way you pick those shots and the way he landed that kick on Marlon. Like, I've just never seen Marlon on his back foot like that so much. It was really interesting. And, you know, going back to the Aldo fight, like a lot of people thought that Marlon lost that fight, right? Like that was a split that everyone thinks Aldo won that fight, you know? So Marlon being, you know, the cutest face in MMA period, you know, it's hard to be angry at him about something like that. So that's where, for me, I really chalk up his most recent stuff because, like, injury stuff like that. That bantamweight division, man, is the best division right now. Like, I can't even tell you how excited I am just for how things might start lining up because you've got so many quality fighters in that top 5. And so when you think about it now, you have Marlon Moraes and a Rob Font trying to make a comeback. What I don't really understand is where these lines could possibly be because we had a quick little brief chat about it, and I'm already a little psyched up because Ricky Simon in 2019 as your last win, so that's over a year ago. Like, I hope Rob Font was in that cryogen, like the same chamber that my boy was when he was fighting, when he was waiting to fight Frieza. Because, frankly, that is what might be required. I know you might not know the reference, but basically Goku just sits in this chamber after a battle and recovers for like 20 straight episodes. So every time they cut to Goku, he's just in this chamber with his mask on, just charging up. And all of his whole family and his friends are just getting beating the shit out of him. Like, it's just constantly. And, like, finally, you're waiting, like, episode after episode for this guy to wake up. And so, unless Rob Font has been in there for the last year... this is a tough fight, right? Marlon Moraes is going to come in very hungry. He's already coming off of, you know, we know he's been in training camp fairly recently. These are the things that make championship fighters, you know. I like Rob Font's style. I like the length. I like what he brings to the division in that way. But, like, you can't compare certain fighters when they have this type of caliber resume, you know. He's going to be the smaller fighter. He's going to have to reach a bit more. That's who Marlon's used to being. Like, Rob's got that length. He's got all that to his name. But it's still Marlon Moraes who has fought anyone and everyone. So that's what scares me.
Yeah. Perfect. And let's dive right into the lines given that. Who's the favorite and by how much?
So for me, length, like we talked about, Moraes just lost via kick. And those are the things that scare me the most, right? So when I'm thinking about looking at lines and looking at what certain fighters bring to the table, the way that Rob Font can probably win is a way that Moraes can probably lose. So do I think Marlon Moraes should be a minus 300 favorite or something? By no means do I think that. But I hope that he is at least a minus 175 favorite. So I'm going to go Marlon Moraes, minus 175.
I'll give you the ball for this one. Let's chime in the bell here. So Marlon Moraes is actually a minus 150 favorite, and it has not moved. It's stayed put at minus 150 so far.
Interesting. And you know what's really great about that line is it does give Rob Font the bump that he deserves for his career, say, from 2016, 2017 to about 2019, right? Whether he's taken a year off for personal reasons, getting better in terms of training, COVID in general derailing when he might have wanted to come back in general. You know, he probably has a whole bunch of reasons to say that. But, you know, older guy, probably his last little stint. Be careful for sure because of where he was at, you know, in his career when he kind of, you know, stopped. But, you know, like we said, Marlon is Marlon.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't see how we don't lock this one in.
Cutest fighter in the UFC. Don't get it twisted, my boy.
All right, and so moving into the next fight, this is the one I am the most excited about. This is Michael Pereira versus Chaos Williams. Michael Pereira, this guy is an entertaining dude. Watching him fight, it's just the most unpredictable leg kicks you could imagine. Dude is flying, doing somersaults and shit. It is amazing. So I'm really excited to see him against that Chaos Williams style. Pereira comes in. He has a 24-11 record. He's had kind of a tough go in the UFC. He's only gone 2-2 since breaking out of that regional scene. Most recently, his loss was to our boy Diego Sanchez. And I actually went back and I rewatched this fight, and he dominated this fight. He absolutely dominated it, in my opinion. But at the end of round 3, he hit Diego with an illegal knee. That gave him the loss. And, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing him get back in the ring. On the flip side, I'm going to drop another biggie track for my man here. But mo money, mo problems for Chaos Williams. This guy just keeps winning. And now he has a real tough bout in front of him. He got the mo money. Now he got the mo problems. So we got Chaos. He's been flying into the scene. He's living up to his name, Chaos. You know what I mean? He comes in and creates chaos. You know, it was crazy to see that he was an underdog in both of his first 2 UFC bouts. To Alex Morono, who we just talked about, and then to Abdul Razak Hassan. And to be honest, he dealt with both of them in what, cumulative minute? I'm pretty sure both of them were like 30-second knockouts. So, you know, dude, I think it's time we put some respect on his name. I'm excited for this one. Tell me what you got here.
Yeah, so I mean, I love the way you opened with kind of talking about where Pereira has his skill. You know, at 24-11, his age, there's a lot to be talked about in terms of history, that kind of thing. Against a guy like Chaos Williams, 11-1, doing all the right things now. You know, it's such an interesting fight when you think about where guys want it to be, where they're at now, and all that fun stuff. Because Chaos Williams, I mean, he's throwing some serious power. And I've such a, like, it's so funny because here's the thing, people. If you told me that I'd be ending my 2020 still, first of all, on a pandemic, taking care of my boy here, but also listening to this man talk about a excitement watching Pereira and Chaos Williams fight. I mean, here we are, boys. I'm making the most of 2020, you know? That's all I can say. But like, it's funny, right? Guess who is the only person, well, not only person, but guess who's the person to knock out your boy Michel Pereira? Your only other boy, Dusko Todorovic. We pounded him.
Wow.
We pounded him against the Townsend, who we just talked about as being one of those like really low-end gatekeepers. And, you know, he's a guy that lost to him. So it's funny, right? I personally think Chaos Williams is a striking beast. I think what he brings to the table is elite because you see the power, you see the speed, and for me, it's the landing. That's what scares me about Geoff Neal, and we'll get into that later. But it's the ability to throw that kind of volume and also land. We saw it against Morono, the way he was able to push him up against that fence and land bombs like that. Like these are punches that are laying dudes out. We took a lot of those unders. We took Chaos in that last fight. Now, the thing with Pereira, I mean, you know, I believe he's taking a fight that maybe some people didn't want, if I'm going to be quite honest with you. I don't know how many people are willing to step into that octagon right now with him. We know that he just came off of a third-round submission. And so there is a chance that this was just the fight that worked for him and he took it anyway. I think that he'll bring versatility. I think that he'll bring experience. I mean, there's going to be a lot of that whole like length game going at it, but the speed, man, the speed that Chaos throws those combos with, the power that he has in some of those punches, you know, even his jab looks so good. It's just very hard for me to not take a guy like that who's firing on all cylinders on this level, you know. Morono's no joke. Yeah. We're talking about a guy who fought Kalanook as a UFC debutant about 4 years ago. Like, that is no joke. And so that's where, for me, you know, all the power to him. I can see this being the making of a very real star to end off 2020.
Yeah, similar to what we saw in Kevin Holland last week. So where do you see this line ending up?
Yeah, so I mean, hype-wise, skill-wise, everything seems to currently line up for Chaos now. So, I mean, do I believe that he's a minus 300? There's just zero chance that that's the case because we're seeing Pereira hold his own in most of his fights as well, especially on the ground, And so I'm going to have to go with Chaos Williams as a minus 160 favorite.
Man, this is going to be another one you're going to put me on hold for to go lay right now. But Pereira opens as a favorite. He opened at a minus 145 favorite when I looked last 2 days ago. If I look now, man, he's a minus 125 favorite. We were getting plus 120 on Chaos before. He's plus 100 right now. I would not be surprised if Chaos Williams is a favorite going into this fight.
And you know why this seems repetitive, Pies, is because if you look at the last few fights that they've put Chaos in, you have to make the argument that it's the exact same setup, right? Let's give him a vet. Let's give him someone that, the odds can be a little bit against him. Let's give him someone that maybe he hasn't proven himself, and then boom, he goes and proves himself in less than, 2 minutes in the first round. So that's where, for me, it's like, obviously we've talked about it, right? When Chimaev fights a guy like Leon Edwards, could that be the fight where we start to see a guy come back down to earth? There's always those kinds of fights for fighters that kind of get on these crazy runs. And unfortunately, especially at first glance, and the line is kind of agreeing with me here, I just don't see Pereira being that kind of fighter. And people are agreeing with me right now.
I agree, and I'm ready to lock that one in. Chaos is my boy. Let's do this. And that is one I think will be a minus 125, minus 130 by fight time.
And big ups to Paisan for getting this excited about a fight that could easily be a prelim in 2019. But here he is, talking about a guy like Chaos Williams like it's his neighbor.
Howdy, neighbor. Tell me you got that one.
Yeah,
Tell me you got that one.
Yeah, I know, and I just picture you kind of like coming up over the fence like this,
That's what would exactly happen. And that takes us into our co-main event. This one's going to be a beauty. We got Jose Aldo against Marlon Vera. I know this is your boy here. It's too bad you don't have that poster up, but you've evolved from Edward Snowden. So let's jump right into this one. I mean, correct me if I'm off base in saying this, but Jose Aldo will go down as one of the greatest fighters of all time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just going through his record, I mean, he does support a 28-7 record, but diving a little into those 7 losses, man, like, who do you got here? You got Jan, you got Volkanovski, you got Max Holloway a few times, you got Conor McGregor. Like, these are the best of the best. If you look at his wins, man, you got Frankie Edgar, you got the Korean Zombie, you got Ricardo Limas. Like, these are great wins. And so, Jose Aldo, all the power to you. I'm looking forward to seeing you back in the ring. On the flip side, we got Marlon Vera, who's no slouch either. He comes in having won 5 of his last 6. His last loss was to Yadong Song in decision back in May. He bounced back from that one, defeating Sean O'Malley in the first round, UFC 252. This one's going to be a doozy. They're both ranked fighters. They both want to get back into title contention. I'm pumped about this one, man.
Yeah, bro. I mean, you introduced it perfectly, right? So Jose Aldo, one of the greatest of all time. It's funny, right? You even went so deep into his record, but the amount of times I've looked into this guy, Luciano Azevedo, who beat him back in 2005, it's like, you set a monster off. Like, whoever you are back in the day in Jungle in 2005 November, you set a monster go off who just took down the entire UFC till Conor McGregor decided to just end lives. So, I mean, here's the thing. The way I look at this fight is Aldo is constantly taking tough fights, right? Like, you point out the losses, so you can see McGregor double loss to Holloway, Volkanovski, Moraes, Peter Yan. Literally fucking title fights, bro. Like, what? Like, that's where he's been.
The best of the best.
And so you brought up the best part of Marlon Vera, that streak. Yadong Song, you could watch the fight and make the argument that maybe Marlon Vera won that fight. That's the part that is really interesting because, had he won that fight, who would he be realistically facing over the last little bit? Because the big thing for me is, how easily did I tell you that Sean O'Malley fight was one of the easiest calls we've ever made? We were screaming that from the top of mountains, people, please, God, lay everything you've got, your houses, your homes, your mortgages, everything you've possibly got. Please go lay it on Marlon Vera. You need to do this. And it was insane how much of a dog he was. It's insane how much hype can be built in the fight game. And that's the part that is very unfortunate in this fight, because I don't know where the lines sit, right? But when you look at these two fighters, Jose Aldo is once again in a fight that's very tough for him, Is he going to be able to get a knockout? Maybe. But Marlon Vera is a very technical striker. He can take a punch. He can take a very good punch. And he can dish it out just as well. Technically sound. Long, long is good against Aldo. He can't kind of run at you and throw those big punches, but he's going to have to chop those legs, which, where did those Aldo leg kicks go? Those leg kicks that made him an absolute monster, that basically put Uriah Faber maybe in a wheelchair, icing his leg for weeks at a time. I mean, that same dude that just excelled so much in that art is just not using it as much. And, getting into these boxing matches with really good strikers, like, I'm sorry, Aldo, but who's your coach? Like, who's telling you to do these things?
Yeah.
Who's telling you to go get in a boxing match with Max Holloway? Who's telling you this? Because please, Aldo, listen to somebody else. In any case, it's like, I love that there's no real reach advantage here. Like, Pies, we're going to be watching a very, very, those fights that keep you on the edge. Like, Dominic Cruz used to do that to me a lot. I can't lie. But there's a lot of certain fighters that keep you on the edge of your seat, because it's like, it's this combination of them being so crisp at what they do and you having this urge or sensation that something's going to happen the whole time. So it renders you silent. It renders you frozen. You're just glued, being like, oh my God, 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 oh my God. You just don't know what's going to happen. And so Aldo's just all about that. And I think this is a great fight for fight fans who love that feeling, because for me, that is probably my favorite kind of fight to watch. And so, not much more can be said about how elite these two are at striking, how little I believe it's going to go to the ground. Scrambles only maybe to get back to the feet. But yeah, it's going to be
an edge on your seat fight for sure. And so let's dive right into the odds here. Who's the favorite, my man?
Yeah, it's really tough to kind of now think about this, right? But recency bias, thinking about just overall competition, how can I not go with Marlon Vera, a guy who might even be, who should be maybe on a multi-fight win streak right now, but isn't because of that decision, who is taking out top caliber people like, Shane O'Malley. The big thing for me is, like, Alex Perez was, he took in Alex Perez. Like, that was his roommate for a while. So those guys out at Timo Yama, like, they're very close-knit, and they really are on the rise. That was a big start for them in fighters that aren't named Chito Vera, right? Like, Marlon is the guy that's leading that camp right now, and it's such an old-school camp, but he is the face, in my opinion. I am very excited to see what he can do. So let's go with Marlon Vera, and let's go with a minus 160 for Marlon Vera.
All right, so again, might slap you in the face a little bit here, but Jose Aldo opened at a pretty heavy favorite, man. He was a minus 180 favorite when I first saw. And, dude, that line is dropping rapidly, man. If I look right now, he's a minus 150. So he's already lost 30 basis points.
Pies, like, I'm on fire here. Like, technically, I'm not bell ringing much, but if you go based on my lines, this is insanity. What is happening over there?
Yeah.
Who set these opening lines? Like, that's my question.
And us, we're losing value by the second, man.
Yeah, like, let's finish this main event so we can get on these finalized bets. My word.
All right, let's do it. But, keep an eye out for Marlon Vera, because that value is juicy.
And maybe even an under here, because, only 3 rounds, but both these guys are going to swing. And to be honest, like, not that I see Marlon Vera getting finished, but unfortunately, like, the right strikes to either or, who knows what can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's jump right into that main event. You're going to have to school me a little bit on this one, because honestly, I don't know a lot about these guys. And reading up about it, you got the Wonder Boy, Stephen Thompson. He's sporting that 15-4-1 record. He hasn't fought in a year. And in that, he beat Vicente Luque, I believe. And prior to that, he had some tough losses to Pettis and to Darren Till. He did beat Masvidal years ago in decision. And it does look like he's looking to become that number 1 contender. Geoff Neal on the flip side rocks that 13-2-0 record. That's 5-0 in the UFC. He did win in Dana White Contender Series. He most recently knocked out Mike Perry. I believe he knocked out Muhammad, who we were supposed to see earlier in the card, but that one got scrapped. And so, yeah, give me a little bit more on this one.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, think of going back to, like, our line about Anthony Pettis. Like, what? He Superman punched Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. What? It's little things like that are still getting me really curious about that Anthony Pettis line. But, let's take a look at this. Like, Geoff Neal, who lost our boy Kevin Holland right back in the day, this man can throw. He can throw for days. He's accurate. He's very strong. I love the power punching, and I love the combinations. He does not take his eyes off your chin. It's very obvious when he smells blood, he knows to go for it. If you look at the way he ended Mike Perry, it very much, Mike Perry's the kind of guy that if he can breathe, he's going to try to stand, right? So, head kick landed, might have been partially blocked, but then you kind of see him just start filling him with a few punches. And Perry tries to do the Perry thing of like eating him like more of a crash test dummy than anything and keeping his hands up, but he just kept getting backed up more and more into the fence and just boom, 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 to the point where, referee has to stop it. The thing that I have to look at his record, right? So you look at Mike Perry, you look at Nico Price, you look at Bilal Muhammad, you look at Frank Camacho and Brian Camozzi. These are, leading out from his Dana White Contender Series in 2017 when, with Brian Camozzi, with Chase Walden, he then goes on this huge, UFC string of wins from Brian Camozzi on. What I don't like about them is if you look at these guys, Nico Price, we saw him fight Donald Cerrone, if you remember. That's not the most technical striker. He's got some good power. He can definitely throw, but he eats a lot of punches. Bilal Muhammad, always ready to game, but again, eats a lot of punches. Always coming out bloody from his fights, but he can still win fights. Frank Camacho, my heart goes out to him. Dude has definitely been a bit of a, crash test dummy himself over the last little bit, and he got beat up. The Camozzi brothers, I just don't see a lot of overall skill. They came in as submission fighters for the most part, and that was his kind of UFC debut, and he got a win there. So you're basically telling me toughest competition for the most part is Mike Perry at this level, or most recently, and finished in the first round. Stephen Thompson wipes the floor with every single fighter I just named. That is nothing against any of those fighters. Stephen Thompson, I think we talked about this kind of off the air, if you will, but he is one of the most accurate when it comes to like technical striking, right? Like he's not looking to blitz you. He's not looking to throw a bunch of random power strikes at you. He's trying to get these kicks in. He's trying to get these jabs in and set them up for a couple other power punches. He's really trying to outstrike you and outpoint you. He's a kickboxer by trade, Taekwondo trained by his dad, I believe. And it's funny, right? The UFC event I covered, UFC 165 out in Toronto, like the Gustafsson Jones fight, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson was actually on the prelim cards. Like that was his come up. And so I got to see him fight live at that time. And it was such a good fight. He's just such a good technical striker. And if you look at his last fights, I mean, Tyrone Woodley, who's having a bit of a tough time dealing with what we would call this, new age welterweight division, he was afraid to really get in there with Thompson because you just don't know what he's going to throw at you. Woodley's got the power punches, but it looked like Steve Wonderboy was at least willing to be like, okay, well, I think I can take them. And he was trying to – it was one of the most boring fights of all time. But it's just one of those things where you at least take in what they're doing right and wrong, The first fight was a draw between Woodley and Thompson. And then he ended up losing a majority decision to Woodley after that. So then you talked about that Masvidal fight was a really good one because that was a huge come-up. And I actually thought Masvidal might have a chance there. But again, we're talking about where the technical striking versus the brawler came into play. And it's how even Masvidal has gotten away with some of his wins is because he's the more technical striking comparison to some of these other guys. So now you're getting into Darren Tills, took that loss. Darren Tills a really, really big welterweight. So a guy that's like primarily designed for middleweight, he had good size for that weight class. And so I can see that loss happening. The only one that is always a little concerning for me is the Anthony Pettis one. But that's what I'm saying. Anthony Pettis is creative. He's different. He fights different. He sees things different, especially when it comes to openings, willing to put his body on the line in terms of, he takes a lot of body shots. He doesn't really like them, but he leaves his body open to land his own kind of craziness. Thompson isn't like that. Thompson will defend. Thompson has that fighter mentality of, I like to get hit less and then try to hit more. Whereas some guys are like, come at me, dog. I'm going to land 20 even if you land 10, blah, blah, blah. That's just not how Thompson fights. And so that's where I feel, you know, if Neal tries to rush in too much, if he tries to be overly powerful, Thompson will be ready for that. And the big thing about this is because it's a 5-round fight, you just want to be careful about your cardio. Thompson has pretty much only been in 5-round fights for the most part till maybe his most recent fights, which he has obviously done fairly well in as well. You know what I mean? So that's what I kind of just advice in terms of dealing with a guy like Thompson. You just want to have your wits about you come rounds 4 and 5 because he's not going to tire himself out throwing too much. He's very aware of how he's approaching a 5-round fight because he's done it so much to try and win a title.
And these are the types of fighters that we kind of look for when capping these is, you know, where's your cardio? Can you go the distance? If that knockout doesn't happen in the first 2 rounds, what's going to happen those final 3? So kind of diving into that, who do you see as the favorite in this one?
Yeah, so it's funny because I kept trying to go off hype or off of name or off of, you know, just overall record. And, you know, it's funny, but I still can't see either of these guys being a huge favorite. And it's funny, Stephen Thompson, in my mind, if I saw him as a minus 300 favorite, it wouldn't even throw me off. It really would not. But I just don't see it. And so that's where I would go with Stephen Thompson as a favorite. And I have to go with maybe a minus 180, minus 170. Let's go with minus 175 favorite in Stephen Thompson.
Yeah, so this was a bit of a loaded question because there actually is no favorite in this one. It is a straight pick 'em, minus 110 on both sides. But, you know, kind of given your analysis there, I got to give the advantage to Thompson here for his ability to try and win this in the later rounds when we know Geoff Neal is going to be tired.
And Geoff Neal has power. He has combinations. He has the push forward. That's the only thing that really kind of throws me off in the first couple rounds, right? Like that's where if he's trying to really you know, get Thompson off of his game, don't let him figure you out for the first 2 to 3 rounds and then steal the fight for the last 3 to 4 rounds. That's what you don't want. You don't want him getting a feeling out pace because the moment he starts to gauge your timing, your speed, your footwork, your combinations, he's going to be able to counter you for the rest of the fight. So the more you're able to throw at him, even if it's like switching levels and trying to get takedowns or at least just pushing him against the fence to just slow him down and not giving him that distance to work with, because that's all that Thompson needs. He needs that distance for his legs. He needs that ability to spread out and get that footwork and get those strikes going. You know, that's what he's going to be looking for early on. So throw him off that game, you might have a better chance of coming away with that W.
Yeah, absolutely. So stay locked in for that one. We'll probably kind of lock that one in closer to the main event, seeing the weigh-ins, hype, all that kind of stuff. But overall, it's going to be a great card. Tune in, UFC this Saturday, December 19th. For us, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button, give us a follow on Instagram, Twitter. Our picks go up all of there, along with all of our other content. You know, clips of our videos from YouTube. Other great MMA content is on the Kaizen MMA. Make sure you check it all out. Give us a follow. Give us a subscribe. Give us a comment. Engage in conversation. Whatever you may want to do to kind of further this. Anything else, Siraj?
No, man, everything. You just hit nail on the head. Like, let's finish the year strong. This is the last fight card for us. You know, we're going to be going real hard at this one, just to have some fun with it. We're really excited for the next couple of weeks to be able to develop, you know, our niche, our, market. It's going to be really fun for us. And so we're really excited for 2021. And, if we don't really, since we don't have a card, as the vet, the bet, and the casual, happy holidays, happy Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll see you for the next card. But, maybe we get you some new content in that time. We shall see.
Yeah, perfect. You said it best, man. Happy holidays to everybody. Thank you for all your support. And Siraj, great seeing you as always, man.
You, my boy. I love you. Peace.
Take care.